Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our To Be Read author series. We hope you have been enjoying our virtual events, and both the Carroll County Public Library and A Likely Story Bookstore appreciate all your support. Remember, the library is open for curbside pickup, and A Likely Story is open for business regular hours. You can order Sherri's book online at the library, or it is currently in stock at A Likely Story, and you can go to our website or come in and get your copy. Just remember some of the To Be Read events that are coming up. This Sunday at 6:30, we will be hosting William Oldfield and Victoria Bruce discussing their nonfiction book, Inspector Oldfeld and the Black Hand Society, America's original gangsters and the U.S. postal detective who brought them to justice. The next Wednesday, August 12th at 6:30, we will have best-selling author Jennifer Steele with her new release, Exile Music. On Tuesday, the 18th, we will have our own Maryland favorite and best-selling author Laura Littman at 7 p.m. Be sure to be on the lookout for all these great events and hope you will join us for them. Tonight, we are very excited to have Sherri Leimkuhler here in conversation with journalist Cat Righter. We are very happy to have both of them with us tonight. Please be sure to type in any questions that you have in the chat bar on Facebook, and we will be dealing with those questions after the interview. Sherri has written professionally for more than 20 years. What's Left Untold is Sherri's debut novel. She is a member of the Women's Fiction Writers Association, the Maryland Writers Association, and the 2020 Debut Authors. Sherri was a finalist for the Women's Fiction Writers Association Rising Star Award. She also writes a bi-weekly fitness and health column for the Fun of Fit, which appears bi-weekly in the Carroll County Times. Sherri is a two-time Ironman triathlete, a yoga instructor, former pilot, a mom of 3 daughters, and 2 Labradors. Just some little note, her favorite food groups are wine and cheese, coffee and chocolate, and beer and seafood. She also loves hike, paddleboard, and traveling. Our thanks to Catalina Righter for being our interviewer this evening. And Catalina grew up in Manchester and until very recently was a news reporter for the Carroll County Times. She is also a poetry reader for the literary journal Cherry Tree. A few reviews of What's Left Untold. Sherri Leimkuhler's What's Left Untold is a grand, sweeping saga about the evolution of family and friendship, how best friends can break our hearts, make us angry, crazy, and sad, and carry us through good times and bad. Thank you for being here, both of you, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate Likely Story and the Carroll County Public Library inviting me to talk with everyone today. And thank you, Kat, for chatting with me this evening.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I really liked reading the book. Do you want to start off and maybe give us a little reading from the novel?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to pick up a section, like a short section to read that is a little bit later in the book. It's after the main character, Anna, has reunited with her estranged best friend, and she really is invested in making the friendship work. She's really trying to reconcile with Leah, but she's not quite sure she trusts Leah yet. They didn't part ways very amicably. In fact, Leah had walked out on the friendship the year after they graduated from high school without explanation, just sort of leaving Anna confused and trying to figure out what went wrong. So they are working to reconcile the friendship, and Anna just doesn't feel like something's quite right. So this is a scene in the book. They've kind of had a girls' day out together, spa and lunch together, and while they're at lunch, Anna decides she's going to confront Leah about, what's going on and try to get some answers. So that's where this reading picks up in the book. Leah dug into her veggie burger with gusto. That massage sure gave me an appetite, she said between bites. The vegan deli was a short walk from the spa. It was a gorgeous day and we had taken our time getting there, meandering along the tree-lined sidewalk that passed in front of a potpourri of quaint boutiques, bakeries, and street vendors. Leah had stopped occasionally to try on a pair of sunglasses or slip a hand-woven straw bag over her shoulder, making idle chatter along the way. The deli was on the corner of a long strip of shops. Small wooden tables with red umbrellas sat on crushed gravel patio, bordered by a bubbling fountain and flowering shrubs. You say things like that a lot, you know, I blurted. Like what? Leah asked, polishing off her burger and starting in on our basket of kale chips. Like alluding to having done something or experienced something that you clearly have not, at least not to my knowledge. Leah absently waved her hand in the air and sipped her green tea. The gesture rubbed me the wrong way, like she was blowing me off, like I had no idea what I was talking about. I straightened my back and squared my shoulders, determined not to let her off the hook this time. I'm not making this up, I pressed. And the more I think about it, the more I realize how much I still don't know about you, about your life. I'm happy that we've reconnected and I treasure our friendship, but it's just this feeling I have sometimes when I'm with you, like you're hiding something from me. Leah's cold indifference pulsed across the table like an outstretched arm, pressing against my chest, holding me at bay. I won't go there again, I said, my voice hard and my hands shaking. Go where? Leah asked, baffled. I won't tolerate you playing games with me. I've been completely honest with you. I've let you into my life again, into my heart again, but I'm not sure I trust you. I feel like you're keeping me at arm's length, which is ironic. I thought it would be me keeping you at a distance, but it doesn't work that way, you know. Our friendship won't work that way. Leah dabbed the corners of her mouth with her napkin. Sometimes it's better that way, Anna, she said, refusing to meet my eyes. And I knew then that I'd touched on something real. Fleeting and delicate, but real. I wasn't imagining it. My words had reached out and grasped the edge of truth, and realization emboldened me. What aren't you telling me, Leah? What are you hiding? You said you wanted to leave the past behind and start a new life. But if that's true, why, after all these years, did you decide to reach out to me again? It just doesn't add up. Leah fidgeted with her napkin. Her pained expression was a window to her internal struggle. When she finally glanced up, I could see the storm of indecision had passed. The clouds of doubt had vanished and her expression was clear and unguarded. I peered into her green eyes, still beautiful and bright despite the fine spray of crow's feet etched at the corners, and I knew the veil had been lifted. I braced myself for the truth. That's it.
Awesome. Are you ready to take some questions for me?
Sure, let's go.
Awesome. So I think a lot of our audience tonight is probably Carroll County folks who might know you from your column in the Times where you write about sports and your athletic pursuits. Could you talk a little bit about how physical activity and sports tie into your writing life? Did they ever intersect at all for you?
Yes, they've intersected for me for sure, in a couple ways, both good and bad. It took 11 years for me to get this book from inspiration to publication. And a large part of that had to do with my athletic pursuits. My husband and I were competitive triathletes for a long time, probably almost a decade. And in the midst of trying to get this book finished and published, it was almost impossible to do both things at once. So there were times when my athletic pursuits definitely impeded my progress with getting this book out. At the same time, working out, exercising, leaving the desk and getting away from the page for a while actually helps me to write better. A lot of times when I get stuck in a story plot line or I couldn't figure out how I wanted the characters to resolve a situation, I would leave and go for a bike ride or go for a hike or a trail run and work through those issues in my head. I feel like a lot of parts of this book were written while I was on my bike. And I always wish I had like a tape recorder or something attached to my helmet or a handheld that I could talk it through. Because sometimes I'd get back and be like, okay, what was it that I figured out while I was running? But usually for me, it's very therapeutic to get out away from my desk and be out in nature and write sections of the story or resolve issues in the story that I can then put on paper when I sit down again.
The inspiration for the story, I believe there was a little bit of a spark from your real life that helped you get started. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. I put in my book at the acknowledgments in the beginning that I had heard once that if you write nonfiction, people that read the book try to figure out how the book is not true. And if you write fiction, readers are trying to figure out how it is true, especially if they know you. So I have always been asked if the book is about me or anyone I know. And the answer to that is definitely no. I've even had asked people if it's me on the cover, because a lot of people think that that's me on the cover and it's not. I had nothing to do with that picture. But the inspiration for the book was definitely came from a real event. My parents were getting ready to move and downsize, and I was at their house helping them pack boxes and clean up closets. And I came across a trunk of childhood memorabilia that had photo albums, yearbooks, and a box of letters. And my favorite part was there was even a pair of leg warmers in there. This box went from like middle school through college. And as I was reading through some of the old letters in the box, one of them had a postscript that caught my attention. It was kind of stood out. It was ominous, a little mysterious. And it said something like, "I need to see you. I have something important to tell you." And at the time I read it, I sort of laughed it off, threw it back in the box and figured I have no idea what that was about. Probably typical high school drama. But as I drove home and thought about it some more, I started to ask myself, what if it did matter? What is something you could learn 20 years after the fact that could still have a major impact on your life? And that was really the main premise that this story was built around, a secret from your past that could still have a major impact on your life today.
You mentioned your cover. Did you get to have any input or give any feedback when you got the first version of your cover?
I did, and I really admire my publisher, Red Adept Publishing, for the input they give us as authors on this cover. Red Adept is an indie press, so it's a small publisher, but one of the benefits of that is I do get to work closely with them on a lot of the decisions that are made, and the cover was one of those decisions. It's a process. I was originally given a form to fill out that asked some basic questions about what I did want to see on the cover and what I did not want to see on the cover, what kind of mood or image I wanted the book to project. And after I filled out this questionnaire, for instance, I said I would like the Bay Bridge, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge factors into this story in the beginning of Leah's journey as her family is moving from the Eastern Shore to the Western Shore of Maryland. Kind of connecting her past to her future symbolically in the way it connects the Eastern to the Western shores of Maryland. And, you know, they grow up in Anne Arundel County, so it's near a lot of water elements. So I wanted a water element in the book. I thought a bridge or something would be a nice addition. So they presented me with two covers and I got to weigh in on which one I liked best. And thankfully, both my publisher and the graphic design team and I were all on the same page. We ruled out one of the covers and then we were left with this one. And this original cover had only one woman on it at the first draft of it. And I felt that this book, Anna is the protagonist, but she is not alone in this journey. This is really a story about Anna and Leah's journey, their friendship. And I felt really important to me that there was a second woman on this cover. And so when they added this woman, she was originally standing next to this one. And I felt that it either looked like a mother-daughter or a relationship that was too friendly. And there is definitely a lot of angst and stress in this relationship with Anna and Leah. So when they moved the second silhouette over to the side, we all knew we had what we wanted because it definitely shows two women. It has a little bit of tension in their body language. I thought The One Woman Alone kind of gave the impression it was a little more sad or forlorn, depressing or something. And adding the second woman in here kind of adds that dynamic we needed between the two characters. So, and as you can see too, there is a bridge and there's water. So I was thrilled with this cover. And after I had the chance to give that input, the cover does go out to a test audience that rates the cover on if they would pick it up off the shelf, what genre they think it is. And the cover tested really well too. So it was a really interesting creative process, and I was happy to have a significant role in it as well.
That sounds really fun. So
yeah.
You mentioned that the bridge was a little bit symbolic, tying Anna's past and future together. For people who haven't read the book, it's written in flashbacks and current time. Was that your original way you wrote the book, or was that something that you and your editor worked on together?
That is the biggest change that occurred throughout the editing process with this book. My original manuscript, the one that was the finalist in the Rising Star Award, the Women's Fiction Writers Rising Star Contest, as Debbie mentioned in the beginning, was written in chronological order. And some of the feedback that I got from the agents after winning that contest, one of them was very strongly feeling that the book, starting with the main character at 15, which is when the flashbacks begin, when Anna is 15, and traveling through her high school years and her first semester of college before it jumps to her as an adult, with too much time spent in the beginning of the book as a teenager. And there was some concern that that would be more appropriate for a YA book rather than women's fiction. So we decided together that it would be better served as a women's fiction book to begin with the main character as an adult and flash back to her teenage years. So it was a major change to the manuscript to take it from chronological format and move it to flashback format. And it is in that flashback format that I began to send it out on submission, and it's the final copy does go back now, flashing back to the 80s and the teen years.
When you're planning your stories, are you a very rigid plotter, or do you tend to leave room for surprise as you're going?
I am a shameless pantser. It's what we call it among writers. You're either a plotter or a pantser, which means you either plot it out meticulously or you fly by the seat of your pants. And to me, the story, it popped to me. I had that inspiration from that real life event, and I almost could envision the story in my head, and I just started to write it. And there were definitely times throughout the story I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. The ending, which is a little shocking, a little controversial, was not originally my intent. I didn't sit down and decide that's how it was going to end. As I wrote the story, I was like, this is how this is going to end. And it kind of surprised me too. And it just seemed to fit. It's not the most efficient way to write. As I work through my second book, I would like to work on being a little bit more strategic about how the process goes. And so in the writing world, when you combine the two, it's called a plotster. So not a plotter or a pantser, it's kind of in the middle of plotster. So my goal is to find a middle ground for the second book.
Are you able to tell us whether the second book will return to these characters, or is it something totally new?
One of the things I hear the most from people that read this book is that they would love to have a sequel. And I originally wrote this book with an epilogue that my editors and publishers decided to omit. They thought it was best for the readers to try to use their own imagination and figure out what happens at the end. That said, the biggest problem with writing a sequel to this book would be there's a huge twist, a surprise at the end, and it would be really difficult to write a follow-up book without ruining the surprise of the first one. So there is a chance that I may someday down the line write it. It's more likely that a prequel would happen with some of the characters. But my second book, the first draft of my second book is finished, and it's completely different. It has nothing to do with what's left untold. It's its own story. So never say never, but definitely not for book 2.
I can confirm the first time I talked to you, I was about 80% through, and I thought I had everything figured out, and then the twist completely caught me. So
yeah,
very surprising. A lot of the book takes place in Maryland, and some of the settings are familiar and some came from your imagination. Can you talk a little bit about creating your fictional Maryland world for your characters?
It was really fun to write about Maryland, and as readers, we're often advised to write what we know. The story comes across as more authentic sometimes if you're writing about things that are familiar to you or near and dear to your heart. And I'm a Maryland girl, born and raised. I did leave the state for 6 years for college and then an internship after, but otherwise I've lived here my whole life. And it was a lot of fun for me to add elements of Maryland, to create the fictional high school and make the blue crab the mascot. So it's the Bayview High Blue Crabs. So I really enjoyed adding elements of that. Anna and her family on one scene have a crab feast, and Anna's friend Faith from the South thinks it's completely disgusting. So as a lot of people not from Maryland think the whole crab picking tradition is a little bit off-putting. So I enjoyed writing about Maryland. There's a scene in here where the characters travel to Sedona, and I have been to Sedona as well. So I loved bringing the beauty of the Red Rocks into those scenes. And Faith is from Alabama. I have been to Gulf Shores, Alabama, but Faith lives in Mobile, and I have not spent time in Mobile. So there was a lot of research involved in really trying to capture a little bit more about the local flair in Mobile. But it was really enjoyable to write about all the different places.
Your book follows Anna and her friend Leah and a lot of the other characters through a really large portion years-wise of their life. When you're talking to readers, is it ever interesting to speak to people at different parts on that age timeline? Do different people read it differently depending on where they are in their life?
I think definitely. The target audience for this book is probably going to be women mid 30s to mid 40s. This kind of prime scene is beginning in Anna's life when she's about 20 years post high school. So she's about 38 when the bulk of the story is taking place. And it does flash back to her as young as 15. And the story moves forward until she's almost 45. So younger readers can really connect with raising young children and what that's like. And a little bit on the older side, the readers Anna struggles with her oldest daughter leaving home and going to college. And I wasn't at that point in my life when I wrote this book. When this book went to my publisher, my oldest daughter was only about 15 or so at the time. So I hadn't been in that experience yet, but I took a lot of what my mom had explained to me about she felt when I went away to school. So readers my age now and a little bit older really can feel those heartstrings being pulled, and that separation of having a child leave home and then trying to integrate a young adult back into family life when they've lived on their own for a while. And then younger readers still, I think, enjoy reading about the teen years, same as readers my age, because I know for me, it was really fun to revisit the 80s, which is when I was a teenager. And younger readers, like my daughter now, who's 19, really enjoyed reading about the teenage years. Of course, she can't relate yet to motherhood and the empty nest and that. So I think there's something here for readers of all ages, from late teens until, infinity. I think everybody has different sections that would speak to them.
Were you nervous at all to let your daughters and your close family read it, or was it pretty much the same as anyone else?
It's a little nerve-wracking. There's definitely a vulnerability when you put intimate work, things that are so important to your heart, that you put out there for everybody to read. And then one of the other common things among writers is once the book is out in the world, it's no longer your book anymore. It's kind of the reader's book. And reviews are so important to authors on Amazon. And so far mine have been very positive, but occasionally they're difficult to read too. And my book deals with some controversial topics, which was partly the intent in writing it. My favorite books to read are books that take me by surprise, or books that make for great discussion because the readers coming from different perspectives have a lot of things to say. And so definitely was not sure how the ending would be received, or about how some of the controversial elements, maybe for like my parents' generation or older, maybe they were a little more conservative. One of the most interesting book discussions I've had was my father-in-law's brother is part of a men's club in the New Jersey, Philadelphia area, and they invited me to speak to their group. And so a dozen men, probably average age was about 80, got on screen and talked about this book. And I never would have imagined that in my wildest dreams. And I kept asking my husband's uncle, are you sure you read the whole book? You know how it ends, right? And they were like, yeah, we loved it. So definitely nerve-wracking, but so far the feedback has been really positive, and I've really appreciated that.
I'm sure no one who had a book this year expected to put it out during COVID-19. Has that changed a lot of your plans over the past couple months?
Yes. Yeah. I never in my wildest dreams also would have imagined I would be releasing my debut novel in the midst of a global pandemic. And so all the things you dream about and think about as a new author, having in-person readings and in-person book signings and meeting with book clubs, is not been able to happen. I've been very fortunate. I've had a couple of these events where I've been able to be outside, or meeting with a small book club, and we were able to spread out chairs on a lawn, 6 feet apart, and talk. And I've really treasured that. But it's been a learn to adapt as you go kind of thing. I had never used Zoom before, and now I've used it so much to, like in this format, to talk with readers from the Carroll County Public Library, since we can't meet in person, or for patrons of a likely story bookstore that I've not been able to meet with in person. But look for the silver lining. I couldn't imagine if this had happened a decade or more ago when we didn't have the technology that we have now. And for example, my launch party was held online. I was originally scheduled to have my launch party at a likely story in Sykesville, and we have had to cancel that, and hopefully we can plan an in-person event in the future. So instead I had a launch party online on Zoom live, and it ended up being a lot of fun. It was an 80s theme. We had 80s music playing, we did trivia, we did giveaways. And the biggest silver lining of all was that though I couldn't be in person with people, I was able to celebrate that moment with people that could not have been here in person. They were a fellow author from Mexico and Texas, and family members and friends that live across the country that would not have been able to participate in person, but were able to share that moment with me online. So I'm learning as I go, making the best of it like all of us are, and just finding the silver linings wherever I can.
Did you get to find a pair of leg warmers for your party?
I did not have a pair of leg warmers for my party because, alas, those did not survive the move from my parents' house, but I did have my high school Letterman jacket, and so did my husband. So we did an awesome side ponytail and he had the collar up on his shirt, and we both had our Letterman's jackets on. So, and we had a lot of people that participated that had some awesome, like Madonna's 80s hair and, you know, In Excess t-shirts and things like that. So we had a lot of fun. No leg warmers that I'm aware of, though. Yeah.
Maybe they were under the desk and you couldn't see.
Maybe that's right. They were hiding them.
Have you gotten a chance to go to Likely Story and see your book there in person on the shelf?
Yes, that was one of the most exciting moments of seeing my book in the wild, we call it, because, you know, another dream come true is to have your book not only in the hands of readers, but to see it out in the wild and at my local bookstore, which I adore, A Likely Story. Debbie does amazing things for the community. And I was with friends having a couple of drinks up the street at a local tavern, and we were walking back to the car, and my friend actually saw it first and stopped and said, "Look, it's your book." And it was right there in the window next to some of my, you know, authors that I admire, like Ellen Hildebrand, and my book is right next to that. And so it was very exciting to see my book in the window in front of Debbie's store. And yeah, that's a moment I think every writer dreams about.
That's fantastic. Awesome. I have another question going back to your writing process. Do you have any special rituals that help you get ready to write, or any quirks as an author that kind of make you stand out?
Yeah, probably so. I am a night owl. It's terrible. I have tried to be more of a morning person. And I have, when I start my day, I feel like I have a whole checklist of things that need to be done. It's my brain is like a whiteboard filled with things, you know, just life things, other work that I have to do, or family related, house related, job related, and bills, paying bills, anything it is. I feel like I need to go through and clear that slate in my mind before I can focus on writing. And that's not a great thing, because sometimes I don't get the amount of writing time in a day that I would plan to. I'm basically compromising writing time to take care of other tasks. But if I don't start with that clean slate, that mental clean slate, it's harder for me to get in the right mindset. It's one of the things, as I strive toward being more of a plotter, that I'm working on, putting the writing first and the other things later. So that's definitely a quirky thing about me. I usually write at home. Before COVID, I did like to go to a local cafe, but I can't have a very noisy place. And so really loud conversations are distracting to me, or loud music that has lyrics. When I write, I love to have music, but it's either usually classical piano or acoustic guitar. I need to have music in the background that doesn't have any words. I like to have a big mug of coffee. That seems to help the brain cells fire a little bit better. And in winter, I like to burn a lavender candle. So that's kind of pretty much my biggest quirks. I can be anywhere. I like to have a nice view if it's possible, and a comfortable place to write. Having a better ergonomic setup is another goal of mine. But other than that, I'd say the coffee and the classical music and the quiet is what I need to write best.
I remember in the book, there's a scene where two characters meet at a coffee shop and eat cinnamon rolls, and my mouth was watering. It was like very vivid description.
Yeah.
Do you have kind of a community of other writers that have helped you through either the writing process itself, or maybe the publication and that kind of stuff that comes after the book's finished?
Oh yes, so much so. I don't know what I would do without these fellow writers and authors. Writing is a very solitary experience, but it doesn't exist in a bubble, and it can't be as successful as it would be without the network of support. I joined the Women's Fiction Writers Association in 2015. And not everybody in that group is published author yet, but they're all writers of women's fiction at different stages in their career. And it's an incredibly supportive group. There is a huge wealth of knowledge. We have regular webinars on different topics. When I was really struggling at one point during my process, I kind of went to that group and said, I really am struggling. I need some help. And an author I had never met offered to meet me for lunch and talk to me about the process and share her experience. Her name is Kara Sue Achterberg, and she's got fiction work out as well as nonfiction work. Her recent book, actually, I have the jacket cover here, 100 Dogs and Counting. She's involved in dog rescue. And this is her second nonfiction book in support of dog rescue. She took time out of her own life to meet with me and kind of talk me off my panic ledge. And that was through my Women's Fiction Writers Association group. The Maryland Writers Association has a local chapter in Carroll that I try to be active with as much as I can. And I recently met a local writers group that before the pandemic was meeting every Wednesday at the Eldersburg Branch Library to write. And that was another step toward becoming a better plotter, because it quickly became my most productive writing day of the week, to go there and commit that day and that time to write with these other authors and writers with me. And the other group that has been essential to this process for me is the 2020 debut authors group. While the Women's Fiction Writers is writers all writing women's fiction, the debut authors is all genres, but we're all authors that are releasing books in 2020, our first books in 2020. So we are going through this process of publishing and releasing books at the same time. And we celebrate together and we commiserate together, especially in this year with the pandemic. We're learning from each other what works, what doesn't. So we're sharing resources. And I could not imagine getting through this. And then finally, with my publisher, Red Adept, I have a mentor within the group. And then I have two fairly local authors, one in Annapolis and one in Pennsylvania, that are both with my publisher, and we've met in person several times, and we really have supported each other as well. So I definitely have had an amazing group of authors and writers to lean on during this process.
I think that I have maybe one more question before we see if there's some from the audience, but I know that you and your character both have dogs, and I was wondering what your dogs' names are.
Oh, my dogs' names are Luna and Bodhi. And it's kind of funny because Luna, at some point in her puppyhood, it turned into lunatic because she was crazy. They're both Labrador retrievers, and they're both very pale fur. So Luna is also kind of a tie-in with the moon. But we've had her since she was a puppy, and she'll be 12 in December. And then Bodhi, we're coming up on 2 years. We rescued him from a lab rescue organization, and he's, we think, going to be 6 or 7 years old this month. But he was rescued from a puppy mill situation and had been used in a breeding circuit and hadn't had the best life. And now he is the biggest love. He's like 95 pounds of like goofy adorableness. And his name is Bodhi. He came to us as Buddy, but we call him Bodhi now. And he and Luna love each other, and he totally has my heart. So I definitely vouch for rescue 100% if anybody is looking to add a furry family member. It's a great way to go. And my book has a yellow lab and a black lab, and their names are Chessie and Bay. And of course, that was a play on the Chesapeake Bay. So that was another local tie-in in the book.
Thank you, Sherri and Kat, for a great conversation. We really appreciate it. We did get some questions from the audience. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that What's Left Untold is available at Carroll County Public Library, as well as A Likely Story. One of the questions was, will there be signed copies available at A Likely Story? And Sherri has agreed that anybody who purchases, she will come down and sign the copies that we have there. So yes, you can get a signed copy at A Likely Story. Give us a call, you can order online, or just come on in. Signed copies aren't there yet, but it should be shortly. So Sherri, what do you like to read, and who is on your bedstand? What book is on your bedstand right now?
Oh my gosh. I love this question. I became a reader. Stephen King was the first author I read as beyond young adult. I've always been an avid reader, and I read a lot of young adult as a teenager, but Stephen King I cut my teeth on adult reading, and I still like his work. I think he's an amazing writer and has a brilliant mind. But mostly now I enjoy reading women's fiction or historical fiction, which is great because they are the women's fiction books in my genre. I love Jennifer Weiner. I love Jodi Picoult. I love Lisa Wingate. I mean, the list is huge. Sarah Buchanan. I love her books. She's got some great psychological thrillers with Greer Hendricks, right? Greer Hendricks and Sarah Buchanan have teamed up. And they're really, really good. And they were some of my inspiration for writing as far as their first book together, The Wife Between Us. When I got to the end, I was like, no way, I didn't see that coming. And it was really a goal of mine to maybe create that same kind of surprise in my book. And from what I hear, I think I've done that at the end. But I just finished, as I held up, Kara Achterberg's book, 100 Dogs and Counting. I just finished. That's nonfiction. I am reading my fellow debut 2020's author and Red Adept author, Barbara Conry. Her book just launched on Tuesday, and it's called Nowhere Near Goodbye. And I'm reading that now. And I'm also reading the third book out by Sarah Buchanan and Greer Hendricks called You Are Not Alone. So I'm kind of just finished one and I'm reading two.
Okay, awesome. You had said that it's based in Maryland, and you talked about the Chesapeake Bay and everything. Any chance that Sykesville is in the book at all?
Sykesville is not mentioned directly in the book. I definitely took the inspiration of our town as far as like the small town pub and the feel. I think there's one part in the book, there's like a pretty dramatic scene with Leah and Anna, and they're going to a tavern. And in my mind, you know, I was picturing Main Street, I was picturing Beck's, where they were driving downtown and parking and going into this place where they were having brunch and having this intense conversation. That was in my mind. Definitely, it's not. And Ellicott Mills is a fictional town I create based off of Ellicott City a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, would you change anything in the book or do anything differently?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I am really pleased with the end result. I had a really amazing team of editors at Red Adept, and I think that the book that we finished with is the book in its best form. I think it is better and stronger in the flashback format than it would have been in chronological. And I really liked the way my editors pushed me and challenged me on certain aspects to keep the story moving forward. And so I think I'm really happy with the end result, and I don't know that I would change anything about how the story unfolds.
Was there any, and this is just on the side there, follow up to that question, is there anything that was taken out of the book that you kind of wish, oh, I like that idea, I like that story plot line, or would you save it for another book since you like the end here?
When we switched from chronological to flashback, we lost some big chunks of Anna's childhood. Mm-hmm. And those definitely had additional Maryland references. Anna, as a child, is growing up in a fictional town in Cambridge, Maryland. And there's a lot more family dynamic with her brother, her older brother, Jeff, who goes off to college. And there was definitely more of Anna's family dynamic that I think was strong in the original content. And it was a little bit sad to see some of that go. And there were some parts of it that I fought to keep, and I'm glad I did. And I think the editors are ultimately glad I kept as well. But yeah, there's definitely some things that get lost in the process.
This book is full of secrets and dangers that come with them. Are you someone who can keep a secret?
I can keep a secret. Yes. The tagline for this book is "Every secret has its price." So I'm going to be aware of that now when I keep a secret. Yeah, I think unless somebody was in danger or somebody was going to be hurt, if somebody entrusted me with something important and it was a secret, I would respect that trust I've been given and keep the secret.
Okay. You've answered some of these in the conversation, but there are a couple comments. One is really happy that you put a crab feast in. You know, that's a Maryland tradition, so very happy to see that. And Teresa's another customer is expressing her excitement to read the new book, read your book. So a lot of excitement there. Have your daughters read the book?
My oldest daughter has read the book. She's already finished it, and it was really, she read it. We were on vacation last week, and she finished the book in a couple days. And my daughters, right now, they are 15, 17, and 19. And as any parents out there with kids that age know, they were all avid readers when they were younger. But as they move through school and get so much schoolwork and homework and required reading, they move a little bit away from enjoying sometimes reading for pleasure, fiction works for pleasure. So my oldest daughter sat down and read this book in a couple of days, and she loved it. She couldn't put it down. And she came and found me on the beach, and she was crying. And I was like, "What's wrong?" And she said, "It was so good. I didn't want it to end." And then she read the acknowledgments, which has a little tribute to my husband and daughters in there. And she was just very touched by reading that, which meant so much to me that I can make her feel that way and be so proud of her mom having written this book. The younger two are in the process of reading, but it's much slower going for them.
Another question about the book. Did you know that the twist was going to happen when you started the book, or did that come about as you were writing?
That came about as I was writing. The big twist at the end was not in my head when I came up with the story. There is a big secret that's revealed. And my original thought with the book is it would kind of end when the first big secret is revealed and the characters would deal with that. But then as the story goes on and the children, Anna's daughters, become a larger role in the book as the book moves forward, there was definitely some additional twist and a huge surprise at the end that was not part of my original plan for this book. And I'm really glad it's there now.
I think that's all the questions we have for tonight, but thank you so much, Sherri, for being here. And Kat, you were great. Thank you. We really appreciate all that you've done for the library and for the store and joining us here today as well. So don't forget, please read What's Left Untold. You'll love it. And she's our own local author here in Sykesville, Carroll County. We really appreciate it, Sherri. Thank you all for joining us. And don't forget, Sunday we have William Oldfeld and his co-writer on Sunday at 6:30. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care. Thanks for having me.